let's dive into the fascinating world of manufacturing cost variances, a topic that might sound a bit dry at first, but trust me, it's more exciting than it seems. Imagine you're a business owner, and every month, you're poring over your financial statements, trying to figure out why your costs are higher than expected, or even better, why they're lower. This is where the total manufacturing cost variance comes into play. So, what exactly is this total manufacturing cost variance? At its core, it's the difference between what you actually spent to produce your goods and what you had planned to spend at the beginning of the period. It's like budgeting for a vacation. You set aside a certain amount for hotels, food, and activities, but when you get back, you realize you spent way more on fancy dinners and souvenirs. That difference, whether it's a pleasant surprise or a frustrating shock, is your variance. Now, this variance can be either favorable or unfavorable. A favorable variance means you spent less than you expected. Who doesn't love that? It's like finding a $20 bill in an old jacket. On the flip side, an unfavorable variance means your costs were higher than anticipated, which can feel like a punch in the gut. Understanding this variance is crucial for businesses because it's a window into their operational efficiency and profitability. The formula for calculating this total manufacturing cost variance is pretty straightforward. You take the factory overhead cost variance, add the direct labor cost variance, and then add the direct materials cost variance. It's like putting together a puzzle. Each piece gives you a clearer picture of where you stand financially. But what causes these variances? Let's break it down. First up, we have direct materials costs. If the price of the raw materials you use to create your product changes, that's going to impact your total variance. For example, if you're in the business of manufacturing furniture and the price of wood suddenly spikes, that's going to hit your costs hard. Next, we look at direct labor costs. If you planned on paying your workers a certain amount but ended up paying more, maybe because you needed to hire additional help or because overtime was required, that's another piece of the variance puzzle. And then there's factory overhead costs. These are your fixed costs like rent and utilities. If your overhead costs rise unexpectedly, that's going to affect your bottom line as well. Now, let's not forget about inefficiencies in the manufacturing process. If your production line is running slower than expected, or if there are delays due to equipment malfunctions, you can bet that's going to lead to unfavorable variances. And changes in demand can also play a significant role. If you suddenly find that your product is flying off the shelves, you might need to ramp up production, which can increase costs if you're not prepared. So, why should you care about tracking this total manufacturing cost variance? Well, understanding it can help you identify areas where you can cut costs. It's like having a financial GPS guiding you toward better efficiency and profitability. If you notice a consistent unfavorable variance in direct materials, for instance, it might be time to renegotiate with your suppliers or find new ones. Now, let's talk about the implications of these variances. If you're seeing a negative total manufacturing cost variance, it means your costs are higher than expected, which can lead to increased expenses and lower profits. That's a tough pill to swallow. On the other hand, a positive variance means you're spending less, which can lead to increased profits. Who wouldn't want that? Regularly reviewing your total manufacturing cost variance is essential. It's like checking your car's oil. If you don't do it regularly, you might end up with bigger problems down the road. By analyzing these variances, you can spot trends and make adjustments to your manufacturing process before issues escalate. Now, let's zoom in on direct material cost variance. This is the difference between the actual cost of the materials you used and what you had budgeted. It can be broken down into two components: the quantity variance and the price variance. If you used more materials than expected, that's a quantity variance. If you paid more for those materials, that's a price variance. Understanding these can help you pinpoint where inefficiencies lie. What causes variations in direct material costs? Well, several factors can come into play. Changes in the price of raw materials are the most obvious culprit. If the market price for steel skyrockets, that's going to impact your costs. Then there's the number of raw materials used. If your production process changes, requiring more materials than before, that will affect your costs. Quality also plays a role. If you switch to a lower quality material to save money, you might find that you need to use more of it, which can backfire. Waste is another factor. If you're generating more scrap than usual, that's money down the drain. Lastly, changes in the production process itself can lead to variances. If you find a more efficient way to produce your goods, you might use fewer materials, which is a win-win. Next, let's tackle direct labor cost variance. This is the difference between what you actually spent on labor and what you had planned. A positive variance means you spent less on labor than expected, while a negative variance means the opposite. Several factors can cause these variances, including the number of hours worked, wage rates, and the mix of employees used. If you have to hire more expensive workers, that can lead to unfavorable variances. The production manager is generally responsible for overseeing these labor costs. If there's an issue with the direct labor cost variance, it's up to them to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. So, what does all this mean for a business owner? The direct labor cost variance is a key indicator of how efficiently your employees are performing. A high variance might suggest that there are inefficiencies in the workforce, while a low variance indicates that things are running smoothly. Now, let's shift gears and talk about factory overhead costs. These are the indirect costs associated with manufacturing, like rent, utilities, and insurance. Tracking these costs is crucial because they can vary significantly from month to month. If you notice an unfavorable factory overhead cost variance, it's essential to investigate and adjust your budget accordingly. The purpose of monitoring factory overhead cost variance is to compare actual costs to what you had planned. If your actual costs are higher, that's a red flag, and you need to figure out why. On the other hand, if your actual costs are lower, that's great news. It means you're controlling your expenses well, which can positively impact your profitability. In conclusion, the total manufacturing cost variance is a vital metric for any business involved in production. It consists of three main components: factory overhead cost variance, direct labor cost variance, and direct material cost variance. By analyzing these variances, you can gain insights into your manufacturing process, identify inefficiencies, and take steps to improve your bottom line. So, whether you're a seasoned business owner or just starting, keep a close eye on your manufacturing cost variances. They're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're a reflection of how well your business is operating, and by understanding them, you can steer your company toward greater efficiency and profitability. Remember, knowledge is power, and in the world of manufacturing, understanding your costs can make all the difference.